Hello. Man, you did that kind of backwards there, man. You did that kind of backwards. My producer throwing me off right from the get-go. Hello and welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for the NECC's first panel in our esports education series. My name is Coach Jim Lowery, and I will be your host today. Today, we're just going to put together a panel and have a program we've been wanting to start up for a while now, trying to educate everyone, whether you're an esports veteran or this is your first time hearing of esports, about everything esports has to offer. We want to help lift up all of esports with our main focus being on collegiate esports, and we will be discussing everything, the good, the bad, the memes, and anything else we can think of. But for today, we'll be focusing on introducing what collegiate esports is all about. We have a great panel today. Let's go ahead and meet them. First among equals, Caleb Glooby, director of the NECC. Caleb, thanks for joining us today, being part of the panel. Go ahead and tell the folks a bit about yourself.
Basically, I got into collegiate esports just over 2 years ago, and I've been learning ever since about what we can do and what we should be doing in order to help out schools, but also to develop our program as such. And it's been a lot of fun and also really challenging, and part of the reason we're able to be here today.
We all love Caleb, mostly because he pays us. But Caleb, it's great to have you here on the panel. Next up, Chase Newcomb, Director of Esports at St. Ambrose University, about 2 hours south of where I am right now. Chase, thank you for being here.
Yeah, no, happy to be here. Yeah, I'm the director of esports and a grassroots organizer. More than happy to provide any knowledge to grow the space.
All right, short and sweet. I kind of like it. Also with us today is Chris Postel from Esports Foundry. He's the one person I don't know very well, so I can't really throw a joke at him. Chris, thank you for being here on the panel.
Thank you for having me, Jim. And yeah, I am one of the old fogies in collegiate esports. I started back in 2012.
So me and Chris have something in common. We're the old men here on this program here today. And last but certainly not least, Nicholas Travis, the assistant GM for esports at Becker College and head coach of Boise State Overwatch. Nicholas, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I got into esports about 5 years ago, coaching for Overwatch in teams like Team Dignitas and Cloud9. I won contenders with the British Hurricane, came into a collegiate esports, and loved it ever since. So I'm looking forward to this. Thank you for having me again.
Alrighty, and we're just gonna jump right into it here. We're already ahead of schedule, which we're gonna love because we're gonna end up way late. So I'm just gonna throw this out there to the entire panel. You guys just sound off if you've got something. How would you, at the moment, describe or define the current collegiate esports scene to those who are completely unaware of what it is?
I would describe collegiate esports as a collection of different games, very similar to any other sport, such as baseball or football. Instead of playing on a baseball diamond or a football field, you play on a computer or a game console. Instead of using a bat and a glove, you use a mouse and a keyboard. They have the same team atmosphere, structure, camaraderie, competitiveness. However, it's important to keep in mind that just because different esports games may use the same equipment, hardware, computers, or consoles as other esports games, they are, in effect, their own unique game. Rocket League and League of Legends have as many differences to one another as hockey and baseball, and administrators looking to establish esports need people that are very knowledgeable at the specific games they're looking to invest in.
That's a really succinct way of putting it. Anyone have anything to add?
Yeah, I'd like to add there's two parts to esports and collegiate esports. There's the competitive element that Nicholas just talked about, which is extremely important, and it's really kind of one of the highlights in the rise of popularity of collegiate esports. But there's also the academic and community element as well, because research shows that over 55% of campus students are gamers in some way, shape, or form. So esports is a new medium within the digital media, as well as in physicality of celebrating connectivity, to bring people together and to find new commonalities and new ways to innovate and educate and experience life together with people. It's a really wonderful thing.
Chase, I'm gonna kind of expand upon this a little bit and shoot it over to you. One thing that hasn't been mentioned, we talked about competitiveness, we talked about the community aspect, but in the collegiate scene specifically is the training, like taking high school players, giving them the training that possibly just like a football player, just like a soccer player, moving onwards and upwards into the professional esports scene. As the director of esports over at St. Ambrose, do you want to talk a little bit about the training aspect of collegiate esports?
Yeah, so I come from a very grassroots background. I didn't realize in the intro we were talking about our background a little bit, so I might have missed that. But I work heavily in the grassroots scenes. I've started competitive programs in colleges. I've helped start high school esports programs, and I've ran a lot of grassroots events, probably over 150 at this point. So looking at the competitive integrity and like growing esports athletes in the collegiate scene, you have to look at it as an experience. You have to look at it as something that they're getting involved with, and they're going and undergoing a transformation through college, right? That's what college is for, to better yourself, stay open-minded and grow in that atmosphere. So if you have someone coming to college just to get a degree, they're not really going to thrive in collegiate esports because it takes passion, it takes the integrity, it
Mhm.
takes the commitment, right? So at St. Ambrose, a huge aspect of what we do in our program, we focus heavily on the mental fortitude that goes into esports. Lots of people, if you look at the pipeline, right, that we have in Scholastic, we have most commonly high school esports, but we're also seeing a lot of middle school stuff pop up in the past couple of years as well. So you have this pipeline that's leading into collegiate, which ideally will then lead into the professional industry, right? So you have to look at collegiate and ask yourself, if you are shaping the future of these professionals, what are we going to focus on, right? What's the important things? I have these people here for 4 years. What can I do to really leave an impact and kind of create that intrinsic motivation so that they can push it on themselves? So we focus heavily on mental fortitude. Meditation practices are becoming a massive commonality in the professional scene. So we focus on meditation practices before play to help our players get into flow state. Obviously, there's more than just playing that these players have to engage with in the teams. So we have practices that we do 3 to 4 days a week, pretty common amongst the collegiate scene. We also have team meetings. Before COVID, we were doing a thing called Fighting Bee Outreach, where we were trying to change the stigma of esports in our culture. We had our players going out to traditional sports events and cheering on their teams at St. Ambrose. We also had them going out into the community and helping with either things that we need in the community. So, like animal shelters, local homeless shelters, to really get involved and show that, once again, right, we're not just gamers in basements anymore. There are some of us that are like that, right? But we've came and evolved from that. We're much more of a compact and wholesome industry.
And Chance, we're going to talk about that stigma in a little bit, so I'm gonna cut you off on your answer there. Caleb, I know we haven't come to you yet, but ironically, you actually have the least experience in the collegiate scene amongst us. But I will go to you for the first question, the first answer for the next question, though. We kind of set the stage there. That's what the collegiate scene is. That's how we're kind of defining it. But what are you seeing that you're most excited about what the collegiate scene could be in the very near future?
It's turning into a lot of different things. And I think that the best part about it is you're starting to see people like St. Ambrose, Boise, Becker, and even a lot of the community run programs, Sac State, and both the Florida Atlantic and Gulf Coast schools. They're turning into something that is actually creating a community on campus and really creating more of an energy around esports that has been so much better for the collegiate space as a whole, as well as you're seeing a lot of different places and people and categories come into this as such. It's really just a community kind of driven thing so far. But the fact that TOs and now games and executives over at the game developers and executives at almost all companies that NECC's had contact with recently, are turning into this fashion of collegiate esports is actually valuable, and there is something around here, and it is starting to look a lot more like football 100 years ago than esports was 10 years ago, right? It's turning into a lot of different kind of fashions, and because of that, there's really no prediction on how collegiate esports will work in the next few years. But the best part about it is that if no one knows, we can develop what we want and how we want to go about it, have a lot more fun with it.
Chris, what about you? What do you think? Maybe in addition to what Caleb said, what are you excited about in the near future for esports?
Yeah, well, I think before we can talk about the future, there's just a very brief acknowledge of the past that we need to see. Collegiate esports started off as Chase said, very community, very grassroots. Well, before we had programs, before we had leagues, we had clubs, we had community organizations, and these were large institutions on campus. We're talking 200, 300, sometimes even in the low thousands of members. And then in 2016 onward, we started seeing programs, and that's a shift backwards or shift forwards in terms of the legitimacy of esports, but it's also a shift backwards in terms of how many students we can actually take care of. The average program is only about 25 to 30 students right now, but it is growing rather quickly. But still, there's a delta there, and so while we're definitely developing the legitimacy of competitive esports, and that's been a huge focus over the past 3 years, and people like Caleb are doing wonderful things in pushing that forward. There's also the unspoken question of, what do we do with the community at large? What do we do academically? Over 2/3 of people who participate in collegiate esports at a scholastic level are involved in STEM-based degrees or directly in a STEM occupation or degree on a track on their own. And so there's a lot of opportunity that you have outside of what we've seen with the evolution of football, just from the professional development. There's implications for economic development locally with keeping local talent back in the regional pipelines. There's business development and helping train students and giving people in esports programs internship opportunities, job opportunities, because they're really driven people. We're all ambitious. We all work really hard to create what we do. We're often top performers, and we're exactly the type of people that employers want. And so I do believe that will be a heavily scrutinized part of the conversation that we'll be seeing in the next 12 to 24 months.
Ironically, we're exactly the type of employees people want to hire until they hear that we're gamers, and then they get a little bit iffy on it. At least I got Caleb to laugh. Tough crowd. Chase, Nicholas, did you guys have anything to add to that one on stuff you're excited to see here in the near future of the esports scene in college?
I personally think that what we're seeing right now in collegiate is, and what we're really seeing right now in esports is really almost a second golden age of esports, right? So if you think back to like the early 1900s, right, when football, basketball, baseball, all of these traditional sports industries were really developing, how did they start? Right? Think back to that question. How did they really begin? And it was grassroots communities and organized and just unorganized leagues, really. And then it was scholastic communities getting it involved in the schools, right? So that same impact and the growth that we saw there, like Chris mentioned, what we're seeing now with esports is an even majorly larger impact. We're seeing exponential growth in the collegiate industry. I mean, what was it, Chris? In like 2012, there was like, it was like 15 colleges that offered scholarships in esports, and now here we are, 2021. There's over 450 schools and growing that are offering scholarships in esports.
It's
So
actually even tighter than that. It was actually 2017 is when we really started seeing scholarships in scholastic esports. So I mean,
there,
that validates it even further.
yeah. So what we're seeing now is it's a movement, right? It's a culture. And when you have something that's this big and able to reach this many people, especially in a COVID-19 world in the middle of a pandemic, we're seeing that grow. I heard a statistic yesterday that was crazy. My roommate was telling me that he saw that 25 the increase of sales of video games went up 25% over the pandemic. And if you look at that as an industry, right? How consumerism works. That's so crazy to consider because people have been stuck at home. And then we think back this past year and we're like, man, Among Us really got big. Fall Guys really got big. Animal Crossing really got big, right? So we had all these massive games that came out this year that people were able to buy into. And so when people buy into that culture, that now creates kind of that bubble where they can now get into esports and they can have a better and deeper understanding for esports. So
I just kind of wish
yeah,
a few less people would have gotten into League of Legends because the amount of trolls this past year in League of Legends was phenomenally higher than the normal amount of trolls there in League of
That's
Legends.
fair.
True facts. True facts.
Nicholas, did you have anything to throw extra on there?
I mean, already covered a bunch of it. But just to reiterate some of the things, I am really excited to see what esports is going to look like when it's universally seen just as seriously as other sports. And it's already on that way in a lot of regards. I feel like a lot of people don't realize just how close it is approaching to where not just from the collegiate aspect, but also from outside professional scene as well. And as one grows, the other just sort of feeds into it. I'm excited to see when events start getting bigger. sponsors bigger events, when colleges refine their production and marketing to showcase their teams to larger audiences, and when parents start realizing that their kids can earn significant esports scholarships to help fund their classes, and they have a choice to make. Are you going to try to get a football scholarship and risk an injury, or go to esports and risk, sprained hand? So
I don't know, man. Carpal tunnel is something you have to live with your entire life, man. It's rough, let me tell you.
carpal tunnel is a factor as well, but compared to any other injury you have in a contact sport, it ain't even close.
Man, you guys got to really learn just to laugh when I make the bad jokes. One thing that none of you touched on, and I just wanted to mention it really quickly, is that not only is all this stuff happening in the collegiate scene, but a lot of colleges, not only are they doing scholarships for esports, a lot of colleges are actually putting esports as part of their athletic departments as well. So a lot of colleges starting to realize that it is a sport, just not the same as their traditional sports, but a sport in and of itself. So that's what I'm most excited about the future of the esports scene collegiately right here. But turning it on its head now, because we all know that there's definitely some negative things and some issues with the collegiate esports space. And I'm going to start with you, Chris. What are a couple examples of issues that you see or you think might be seen here in the future for collegiate esports?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you handed this off to me because I can speak on this topic for literally hours. I'm going to start. I'm going to just do two grievances. I have two big ones. The first one is what you said. I actually don't like that esports is being put under athletics.
Mhm.
I don't like it at all. Because what a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of universities have legal contracts with entities like Learfield, NCAA, and when you
Mhm.
put a department of esports, this entity, esports is like water. If you want it to be in a cup, it's going to fill a cup. If you give it a house, it will fill the house. You are limiting the potential of what collegiate esports can do for a college or an institution or a university by funneling it under this idea that it is only competition. Not only that, but you're also opening yourself up to legal liability that you don't even know about. All of a sudden, you're going to lose your broadcasting rights. All of a sudden, you're going to lose your monetization rights. All of a sudden, you're going to lose your marketing rights, your sponsorship rights. And it's going to go to all these other third parties that already have their agreements. We've got a vested stake in the game. We own the brand esports gear. But if you've got a brand deal with Adidas that's going to be your department partner for athletics, I can't work with you. And you can't work with anyone else grassroots except for Adidas, and you pay their price. So there's a ton of things that I have a lot of issue about it being just pushed under athletics just because of the stigma, the positive stigma of competition. That's
Can
number
I,
one.
can I ask can I ask you a question here, Chris?
Yo,
There could be some negative things there. Here at Upper Iowa, we're under athletics umbrella. And the only reason we're able to give scholarships is because they're athletic scholarships. So, I mean, you would have to agree that there are some good things about being in an athletics department, correct?
oh yeah, that's true. But I would also counterpoint with the University of Utah under Mike that just in their announcement they're giving out scholarships for journalism department students. They're giving out scholarships for production department students. That you don't even have to be a player in their program to get $1,000 scholarship on a semesterly basis. That's $2,000 a year just for being a journalism student, and you get to go publish content under ou.edu/esports. Like that's a very validating thing that you're publishing out of the University of Oklahoma. Um, so I agree with you, but I'm also saying that it doesn't have to be just that. We can think bigger. The
We
second
need
part that I wanted,
esports departments, right?
Yes.
yes,
We need
exactly.
Yeah.
esports departments, not
Oh
athletic
yeah.
departments, esports
Like,
departments.
I
We're
just have an
working on it.
I just give you an
We'll get
example
there.
on this. I've had
About
I
one
was
in three have actual esports departments. About another one in about 40% are actually under athletics, and then the rest of them, we actually did a huge study on this. The rest of them are actually under academic departments, largely because the director might just be a current faculty member or an IT worker who's just getting a stipend doing this as a pilot program. So there's a lot of different categories of collegiate esports.
I think Nick and Chase both had something they wanted to add there, and I'm going to come back to you, Chris, because you said you had a second thing you wanted to go after. But Nick, you wanted to jump in there real quick?
just to add how some of like a ridiculous problem that I heard about esports programs being tied in with athletics. And it wasn't a school I was involved with, but another school that I was helping out. They had their players have to go through concussive protocol training. Just esports players go through concussion training because they were tied up with athletics. It made absolutely no sense, but it was a legal reason because they were tied up with the athletic situation, and it's just ridiculous. It's just some things that happen to do with it. There are some benefits, like in terms of scholarships, but there are some really weird things that happen too when you start tying it up because of what's already precedent in terms of those situations.
All right,
But
Chase, I'm gonna jump to you here. Caleb looked like he wanted to step on top of what Nick was saying, and he kept his mouth shut, and I'm proud of him. Caleb, you had something you wanted to say in response to what Nick was saying.
It goes back to what Chris said. It's esports is water, and if you give us the ceiling, we will take every piece of it and try and do as much as we possibly can with it. And I know I've had this talk with Shifty before. It really does deserve its own department. It really does deserve its own curriculum, its own whatever it needs. It will honestly take it. And coaches, the biggest collegiate esports problem right now is coaches, and the fact that most schools won't actually put any time or money into coaches because they think that one coach can direct all of esports while doing all the director positions that they need to do while running 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games, right?
Yep.
And that's got to be one of the major problems with collegiate esports is the coaching problem, is that we're not getting coaches. And even then, esports is a problem where we don't have enough coaches anyway. So needing more collegiates is kind of hard anyways.
Let me
Caleb,
touch on that.
Caleb, I'm gonna come back to what you were saying there with another question. Nick, I'm gonna come back, but Chase, I gotta let Chase get in here because he wanted to comment something back on what Chris was saying, unless he forgot about what it was.
No, I didn't forget about it. I've known Chris for a while. Chris was actually a huge hand in how I got into this industry. Back in 2015, I started Cardinal Esports at Ball State, and really what he said has a lot of truth to it because I can see it from both perspectives, right? I see it from the perspective of, yes, esports needs their own departments, but I also see it from the perspective of I started a grassroots esports organization at Ball State, Cardinal Esports, and grew it in 2015 from 15 members all the way to 200 members with 8 competing teams on a $0 budget. And we were running Battle for Indiana on campus, inviting schools like IU, Purdue, Notre Dame to come out and compete on a $0 budget just for bragging rights, right? So it goes back to that water analogy he was using. We had a cup and we filled up the cup to the brim. And so now I saw that and I was able to transfer, I got into the field after that. And then I went into started Paradigm, and now I'm at St. Ambrose. And at St. Ambrose, we are under athletics, and athletics does a great job. I'm very grateful coming from the background of like not having a budget at all to having a budget, having staff, having dedicated people to work with it. But I'm also where they're at and seeing forward in the future and seeing really what this can scale to if we allow it to. So I do want to say from that perspective, I'm super grateful for our athletics department. They've been huge in advocating and pushing for us. And I know that some people are wishy-washy with how that works, depending on the athletic department. But being able to offer scholarships, right? If you have an esports department, just let the esports department, like an athletics department, offer scholarships, but let them regulate their own thing. We don't need to have all the mollies of traditional sports kind of just married into esports, right? We are very knowledgeable, and there are people in the space that know how to do this model. We just have to listen and open our ears to what they're saying. So really, that's what I was just going to get at.
Everybody kind of touched on it. Everybody was kind of grumbling while everybody else was saying their piece. And it's interesting because everybody here is part of the esports space. I might be the only person who came from the athletic side to begin with, which puts me in a really weird position here. But you all talked about how esports should have its own department. I'm not saying that I disagree because I do agree it would be great. The question becomes, how do we get schools to not only realize that, but to put money towards it? So let me posit that as a question. And anybody with an answer to that one, go ahead and jump out. And I'm probably going to take notes because if you've got an answer for this one, we all need to know the answer.
The best way I can put that is right now, a lot of different esports at colleges have it to where they are a subset of the athletics program. And then they have, okay, let me put it this way. Luckily, I'm surrounded by people on this panel who are great examples of successful programs. However, one of the biggest problems that administrators have is not setting up their esports programs to succeed with a proper foundation. Far too many colleges either have people who aren't experts in the field creating their foundation, or have way too few full-time staff handling the entire branch of esports. I've seen too many programs have as little as one person handling everything from the equipment, recruiting, production, marketing, coaching, setting up scrims, setting up
Upkeep.
tournaments, etc. Way too many stuff. They need help. For as many as 5 to 7 esports teams at once. Remember back earlier we talked about how each esports team is its own sport. Each game is its own sport to a large extent. This leads to an over-reliance on a delegation of too many important tasks on inexperienced students.
Okay,
And-
Nicholas,
Sunday?
I'm gonna.
Is it
I'm gonna-
Sunday? Because this man is preaching. This
Okay.
man is preaching.
Okay, guys, and I'm right there with you, but I'm gonna play devil's advocate here because that's kind of my job as the host. If if a school can't get there, isn't it better for a school to do what they can than nothing if they can't reach that pinnacle of what we want, though?
Well,
I
that was
mean,
literally my
you're-
next sentence, but you interrupted me.
I'm gonna do it all night too. I'm gonna do it all night. You were getting emotional, man. We were trying to keep it on point.
That is on point. That is definitely the point. So absolutely, you want to try to do as best you can in that situation. But when you talked about your question was, how are you going to get them to be convinced that it's worthwhile? Let me ask you this: if you had your athletics director also be your tennis, baseball, and football coach, and your players doubled as your assistant coaches, how successful do you think your school sports program is going to be? They have to ask that question when they start allocating resources. You want to
You
make
don't
sure
wanna
that the
ask me that one.
foundation is there.
You don't want to ask me
absolutely-
that one.
I keep going back in my head to the story, and Jim, I actually want you to say this. How did you get to be a collegiate coach? Because that story is happening on so many campuses, it's unnerving.
It is. I would like to point something out though. And you guys all said, oh, like 100 years ago when sports were starting, this is how it was, right? And Nick brought this up, so I'm gonna drop this one in here. And Nick, you said the exact wrong thing. Upper Iowa University, small school, back 100 years ago when they started with athletics programs here, the athletics director was also the baseball coach, the basketball coach, and the football coach, and they won all the freaking time.
100 years ago, maybe.
That's what I'm saying. Well, that's where we are with esports right now. With esports,
You-
we're at that same point in time.
Let's talk about that. I don't believe the 100 years ago is a good comparison. I really don't think it is.
Okay.
Because there is so much of an evolving door when it comes to how esports is going to be in the next 5 to 10 years, as opposed to everything in the next 100 years. Because esports has a track record that can follow with the sports. You can look at a lot of different colleges that are already up and running with it. And compared to how things were 100 years ago, it is not the same. It's not going to take 100 years to do that. And yes, 100 years ago, you can take a small team and let's face it, competition on everything in sports related and what the colleges were handled there was a lot lower. I think a lot less money was involved in that thing. It's just like you're trying to compare sports in general from 100 years ago to today. So much more money, so much more technology, so many more things that have refined since then that esports is going to take advantage of in the next 5-10 years. So I don't like necessarily comparing it to 100 years ago, saying it's going to take that long to aggress, or that, oh, one person can take this to and go and run with it and everything. Esports has already left that stage. You cannot take one person and be the head coach of all those things and then be successful in all those things at once. Maybe 5 to 7 years ago, maybe, but we're already left that stage.
Like I said, I was just playing devil's advocate. I'm right there with you. I need to come back to Chris though, because he had a second grievance and I told him we were going to come back to it.
You're muted.
Still muted.
There we go. My bad. Before I go to that second grievance, I want to say something that Nick will probably not like to hear. I agree with you, Jim, but I don't agree with you 100%. I think both of you have a very valid point, but it's kind of like missing the forest for the trees here. The one of the key things about collegiate esports we've all hit on is that it's new, and because it's new, even though we, being in the space, understand it clearly, there are a lot of actors and stakeholders who do not. Hence, we're at where there are programs that are underfunded, underdeveloped, and the reason for that is there's not enough data out there to populate. We have consultants, and we have our own personal opinions on, consultants, whether they're in or out of the industry, endemic or non. But you also have people who come out of the club scene, the club environment, like Chase or I did, and matriculate into these roles. But everything that we've had for the past 10 years is almost entirely anecdotal. And if you go to a university, let's take a Division 1 school, and you tell them you should do esports, they say why, and you say it's great for the students, and they say why, and you say, well, you go through that bell and whistle, and then you get to the financial side. They say, why should I give you X dollars? How much you need? And you say, sticker shock, $500,000, $1 million, whatever. And they say why, and you don't have an answer for that. You can't tell me the P&L of how this program is going to do. You can't tell me data on other. You can give me a link to UCI's program on an article website. You can tell me Grandview's program on an article website. You can tell me Robert Morris on an article website, but you can't tell me the data of what's the average size of a program, how much revenue does that program bring in, how many students do we need, what type of equipment do we need. This is not consulting. This is bare bones basic information. There's a single school that has adopted esports within the past year that doesn't have someone endemically helping them out that can find this information. And so if they can't make an educated decision, there is not a single risk assessment, VP in any organization, no CFO will sign off on a risky venture. And that's the thing. It's a risky venture. And what we see, and ties right into my complaint number 2, Jim, is that a lot of esports programs have been built with the current state of esports in mind, not planning for future growth. What do I mean by that? They're basically pilot programs. We have over 250 programs across the country, and they're pilot programs. They are test programs. These are not full investments in a sports program, which is kind of what Nicholas is alluding to, what it can be. Yes, it can be, but it's not. And because no one's going to make that stance because they don't know what the ROI is. We just found out over COVID that the retention rate of students was 93%, but we also know that people's grades were really bad overall, adjusting to online learning. So what does that mean? We don't know, but at least we can find out what the revenue is finally. So that's
and it's really interesting that every coach on the panel, and I even heard people not pictured, everybody started nodding about the grades thing.
Yeah,
everybody
really
started nodding
problem.
about the grades thing. No, and it is a problem. I was just laughing looking around the panel
Yeah.
that it's like all the coaches are like, yeah, you're telling us.
Yeah, but basically what I'm trying to say is that there's a huge delta in available data, and just transparently raising my hand, I've tried to democratize data for 10 years, and I'm continuing to do that and keeping it free. I'm not barring anything behind, pay me a fee and I'll tell you what to do. I don't believe in that as much. There's needs for it, but there needs to be a public repository. This whole tribalism of leagues do it this way versus this way is just wrong. But on the other part of it, it puts us in a very difficult spot when you talk about the future, because when you've got a facility with 20 computers, but you're growing at a rate of 15 students per year, what the heck's going to happen when your program hits year 3? Are you going to go back to the university and say, hey, I need a bigger space, I need new real estate, and I need a new injection of money? The university's already checked your box off on their innovation log and their 10-year plan, and they're happy with it, and they're going to be grumbly because now you're coming back up and you're going to disrupt the next innovative project they've got, fighting for real estate. And a lot of schools won't be able to do that. And we've done so much in taking it from literally 3 programs in 2016 to over 250 in 2021. And there are going to be states that have more than 20 programs in addition coming online next fall. But they're all homogenous, they're all small, and they're going to run into bandwidth issue. Even big programs, like I use Grandview in a positive way, but I'll use it in a negative way, that they cap their program size at 45 students because they don't have space for more. And they're located in the basement of a student dorm, which a lot of people don't know. So how are you going to do academic integration? How are you going to do, program growth and development? You can't. And that's a huge problem. So that's my grievance number 2. And that's why I think both of you are close, but it's missing the forest for the trees, in my humble opinion.
I'd like to jump on for just the freedom of information and that whole conversation. I think that there's programs that are making money. There's no question about it. There's no way Maryville, there's no way Boise State can do what they do if they're not making money, or at least creating a future plan for how to create money. They have a growth plan. They have development. But the problem is that you get Akron's a great example. They're still student run. They're one of the best programs in the U.S. in terms of quality of players, volume of players, volume of students engaged on campus. Alabama is the same way. They have over 1,000 kids in their Discord, student run. There's 13 students running that entire thing. They're fighting with their school to even be qualified as varsity program at this point, right? The freedom of information is 90% of it. The other 10% is also just having the right people in place to be able to communicate this effectively. And that's, I mean, the education panel is a part of this. Let's effectively communicate to the people that need to hear it how to go about just basic steps of learning these pieces, right? But also, there's like 300 other pieces of like, well, what do I need to know? What analytics do I need to know? How do I go about developing it? Who do I need on hand, right? And that's Jiffy's grievance earlier. Who do I need on hand to be able to run my program effectively? What does that look like? Where do I need to go for sponsorships? How do I generate revenue? No one knows this because it's not the same as sports. It's a completely different atmosphere. And yeah, a lot of things will cross over from sports, but they're not the same. And that's one of the biggest problems with collegiate esports and esports as a whole right now is no one knows how to transfer that value. And there's a bunch of people that are really good at it. But no one really knows how to transfer that value and be able to communicate this analytics effectively to be able to develop not just Boise State or Maryville or Northwood, because those programs are doing it right, but they've had the right people at hand for the long time. Now they need to release their stats, and here's what we're doing for analytics, but they won't do that because that's IP. That's a whole bunch of other problems that we get into. And then you just run into the problem of it's my thing, not your thing. And that's what sports has been in for the last 80 years.
All right, so I think we're all agreed on a couple of different grievances here. So now the question becomes, how do we go about solving this? That's the next step. How do we go about solving it? Because we could say what the problem is, we can complain about the problem. And we could say we need more money, we need more bodies, we need this, we need that. But just saying it's not going to make it happen. So how do we go about solving it is the next question.
I
I
want to
think-
start because I know
Yes.
the rest of the three are going to have better answers than I will for this
Well, I think
because they are all
so.
yeah, no, I think it all starts with community, right?
Yeah.
You get a community, and it's not just about sowing the seeds, right? Sowing the seeds is great. We're sowing the seeds right now. We're starting to get a plentiful harvest. What's important is consistency and continuing to help that harvest, right? So I think if everyone was paying attention closely to what we've been talking about the past 20, 30 minutes, be data driven. When you're talking to your athletic directors, don't go into those meetings with I don't knows. When you're talking with the people above you, don't go into those meetings with I don't knows. Make sure you know the information. Have information on the industry, have information on your program, and communicate effectively what you want to do. Have 3-year plans for your program. You're communicating very clearly. Have 5-year plans for your program so that not only are you helping your program while you're there, but if something happens to you, because this is a very fast changing and adaptive industry, if something happens to you or if you go somewhere else, the program is going to be fine without you. It's going to succeed without you needing to be there to fill the role. And that's another huge thing that we're seeing in the industry right now is while they're small programs, right? We talked about earlier, we have 1 or 2 coaches leading up an entire like 3-4 team program. And so when the coach leaves, someone comes in to fill in and has no idea what to do, right? Because there's no
Yep.
there's no foundation. So be data driven and make sure that you have structure to your program, like for longevity.
Actually, let me touch on that. So a big thing is also important with that as well, is that if you have if you do get lucky enough to have one of the amazing people here or someone else that can actually handle creating a structure for your esports program and really get something that is successful, make sure you do two things. One, you give them the help that they need to be able to not, first of all, not go crazy. And second of all, help them become successful. Obviously on a reasonable budget, but they'll keeping that communication open with that. And 2, making sure that you pay competitive salaries for that. And I'm touching on that because it's important to say there's a lot of opportunities out there that have a lot of responsibilities but don't have competitive salaries. And if you do get lucky enough to find someone that can somehow do that, they're not going to stay there long because they're going to be looking for the first opportunity out of there. It's a better offer. And if they do get something like that and they do leave, then you have something that could have been good and they're not there anymore. The next person that comes in doesn't exactly know how it's working, and it may completely devolve in that situation. So making sure that you create something that's going to be long lasting for the future is really important for that program. In addition to that is also making sure that you really invest in your production. I mean, let me make sure that your production is important. And I feel like way too few colleges have really invested in that. Building a community is good. Production helps with that community. If you have a great esports program, if you have a great esports team and no one knows about it, what's the point? And
Yeah.
I've seen
And
that.
I would say it's not just production, but marketing, right?
Marketing too. I kind of
Yeah.
lump them kind of hive way, but they're in with me though. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I fully agree with that, but it's one of those things where some of these programs don't have fully flushed out spaces for marketing. Um and you know, I find it funny that Boise's like, yeah, you guys got to push on production. You guys are like the best in the space for production, right? You guys do awesome. You guys have a whole room for it. And I think that you guys are setting that staple, and that's amazing. We should all be looking at that because now you've gone into a new space that we've not seen in collegiate, and you guys put out pictures of that space and you make it very public. That looks awesome for coaches like me that are looking to expand into new spaces and can show their directors or show who's above them, look, this is what's happening right now, this is what we're doing, and this is what they are scaling to. So why are we not scaling in that same regard? So no, I just wanted to piggyback on that. It's also marketing that's heavily intensive. If you don't have an active social media, what are you doing?
I want to
I
go
feel like
back
they're
to
both
something.
entwined. Yeah.
I want to go back to something that Shifty quickly said, which is coaches that are valuable enough that they can create anything at their school are willing to go get another job across the country for 5,000 to 10,000 more, because guess what? It takes a lot more money than that to do what they're doing. And I've been reached out to in the last 3 months by 20 separate coaches within the NECC about, hey, here's what I'm doing. Is there a job opportunity that I could get paid more from this, or have more access to coaches, or have more access to X, Y, Z, said, whatever, right? It's such an endemic problem that schools are like, here's our thing, let's go push it, but not continue to develop it, right? This isn't sports. This isn't a fleshed out plan that you've had for 20 years. This is esports. This is something that you need to continually learn and develop on for at least the next 20 years before you can plug and play year after year about what's going on. Because esports will develop faster and faster and faster until schools, and I've started to see this happening, schools get left in the dust. There was a school last year, the first school that ever offered an esports curriculum has gone under because they didn't continue to develop. They didn't continue to work on that product that they had continually pushed and continually developed, and they became obsolete. And due to a couple other problems as well, they had to go under, right? They had to give up on their idea of here's what we think this is going to look for. But continued development is part of the thing. And if you're looking to develop or build an esports program, you have to be able to prove why you need to continue developing and why you're going to continue need either cash injections or sponsors or whatever that looks like. And you have to be able to prove here's our plan for the next 5 years. Here's the 3 years that we're going to need development because we're going to be too big for whatever this plan was at that year. And that's going to be even smaller than what you think it is based on so many schools that we have seen that have started up programs and like, wait a second, there's 200 kids on campus that we didn't know about. Springfield College, a great example. They put out a quick poll of their kids and it said, hey, do you guys know what esports is and would you be willing to play on a team? One of their students ends up saying, hey, I'm going to go develop an esports program on their campus. And all of a sudden, 4 times the amount of kids that answered that poll saying they know about esports showed up and are playing and competing in that program at some capacity, because esports kids don't care about a quick poll. They care about what you're actually doing, and they will join after you start actually doing something. And that's why Springfield is a great example of, hey, what's happening? Oh, wait, lots happening, right? So you need to have a continued developed plan about growing into esports and making sure that you continue to develop into esports, because you'll watch the Boise States walk away from you.
I want to add to that, and I think this is important. When you do that, and when, like he just said, if you create the opportunity, they're going to come. you also have to be looking at your overall community, because your college is going to take it more seriously if there's 15 high schools in the area that also have esports teams rather than if there isn't, right? So if you go to those high schools, and the model that I've used is I go to the high school, I try to get in a meeting with the principal or the vice principal, I explain who I am, etc. But I tell them, let me, there's a couple of kids that I found that are interested here. Let me run a call out meeting. I guarantee it's standing room only. Guarantee it. And every call out meeting I've had has been standing room only, because that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that's how they want to get involved. And if you can create something bigger than just your program, which I think is what we're really talking about here, you can create a culture. And if you're creating a culture, it's going to be unstoppable, but you have to be the one that's doing it. I wanted to piggyback off that, Caleb. Completely agree.
Chris, you have an answer. Let's get you in.
Okay. Talking about, solutions, I think everything that you all have said is gold, and anyone who's watching should be taking notes. And it should be intuitive, and if it's not intuitive, then you really got to review this panel. I would say a couple of things. The first is just understanding that esports is not copy paste. What's going to work for Boise State is not going to work for Tribeca Community College. It's not going to work for the University of Cincinnati, and it won't work for UCI. Each school needs to approach esports with a different goal of what they want to accomplish with a program. The best thing that we can do as a community is arm them with all of the knowledge and resources at the leaders' fingertips to allow them the opportunity to accomplish what they want to do. For a lot of schools right now, that's just purely competition. And at the end of the day, that's okay. In 3 years from now, that might be, STEM integration. And that's also great. But some schools might want to build a actual esports certificate program. And that's something that they'll need to work into, like what Chase said, a 3-year, 5-year plan. The trick here in the solution is that we as a community need to be, and I used this phrase before, democratic with the proselytization of the data and information about esports, because ultimately we're the drivers, but we're not decision makers. We need to be able to identify, what's the financial incentive for any university at any level. We need to be able to identify what's the real community population that is appreciating and engaging with the work that we're doing. There's 2 different categories. And we can then go from there based on what the university wants. And so it's important to understand how much revenue will this program bring in, because this is about dollars and cents at the end of the day, for a lot of these institutions. The other part is, if we build it, will they come? And that's a fear that a lot of administrators that I talk to on a weekly basis have, because they're not sure. And the more that we can do to reassure them with quantifiable data that yes, they're there, and yes, they want to come, like what examples that Chase was talking about. It's often better for them to see it and believe it, but if we can do it better with Newzoo data reports or equivalents of such, then we can start those conversations, because like we all have kind of touched on, esports is going to go in many different directions. There's a lot of different people beyond the communities represented in this room that have their eyes on this. And so it's going to go in different directions, because with big attention comes big money, comes third-party organizations, and we don't need to forget that. We shouldn't forget that. The only thing that we can do is ensure that as much information is available, so that the key stakeholders that are responsible for building the dreams that we're dreaming today can happen 3 to 5 years from now. And that's my spiel.
To add to that, we're talking about longevity. We're talking about the future. Everyone in these meetings should be bringing up hitmarker.net to their administrators. If you guys don't know what Hitmarker is, it's a job aggregation site for esports. Go check it out, hitmarker.net. It's not just esports. It's mainly, like, I guess, tech jobs, because it also goes into the creation of games, not just working in the industry. But there are over 12,000 open positions on there right now. And so if the question is, well, is there an industry for this? That right there is a silver plate of an answer to them. Yes, there
I
is.
want to caveat to that, devil's advocate. There are
Yes.
more students in game development tracks right now in the United States and Canada than there are game development jobs available in the United States and Canada.
That's
Just
also true.
caveat.
But like even looking at it like social media managers, right? Production managers, head coaches of universities, head coaches. I use that term lightly, but they're still on there, right? There's still viable opportunities that they can take that are job opportunities. And it goes unnoticed because, like you said, Chris, we're not sharing this information. So the next time that you have a college in your area start an esports team and you have that guy message you and say, hey, I know and recognize your name because you also have this amazing program that you've worked with at your university, instead of leaving them on red, be the one to engage them, because that's your colleague, that's now your brother in arms in esports, and you have to, it's kind of our diligence to make sure that we're all going through this together and helping each other out, not holding or withholding data.
All right, I'm gonna come back at this from a different angle here just to see what you all have to say. It's something that Caleb kind of touched on earlier with a something that personally happened to me. Um, some schools don't have the money. Some schools don't have what they need to properly support esports. Some schools, as Chris said, they checked it off their list. You know, well, we've got it. Let's see what happens. Um, for schools who have one coach that's doing everything, what advice do you have to someone like that who got brought in, nobody knew what was going to happen, and now they're in charge of everything, and the school's done what they can. They would like to do more, but maybe the school just can't do more, and they're holding the, with both hands and some string. What would you like to say to those coaches?
I would say follow the money. If you can prove that, hey, my program has brought in X number of people and has raised X baseline revenue, subtracting scholarships for the university, and I'm doing this as a one-man show, then show them the value proposition and explain that, I can, if it I this program can operate 30% more efficiently if I have, a coach, or I have an assistant, or I have, you know a psychology coach or something along those lines. I feel like a lot of the reasons why a lot of these programs start off small and stay small is simply either the way the programs were pitched, or the way that the EDs are asking for more. And it's nothing against the EDs. It's just a simple statement that, we know esports, but a lot of us may not understand how to operate in a university political realm like maybe many of our older colleagues may understand. And that's not a bad thing. It's just a simple fact that we all just got to do better. And the better information and understanding what the stakeholders want and answer to them in that way, that's the best way you're going to get what you want, hands down.
I think that there's a lot of different ways that this piece could go. And in some ways, it's as simple as, and this is more along the lines of a community college problem. In some ways, it's just put a kid in that position and show the value. If you could show the value of a kid in that position who doesn't know what he's talking about and can create a return on that kind of thing, normally you'll see something from the community college's standpoint of where they're putting someone else in that position. And I've seen this 4 times right now out of schools that have been in that position, 4 teams. And a lot of one coach director programs have totally different aspects of where they're coming in or how they're coming in. In most cases, it is coming from a school position where they're a teacher or they're doing something else or they know something about esports, right? And they're somewhat knowledgeable in esports. And that's why a lot of these programs are like, hey, we're going to run a program. We're going to put 20 computers in a room and then we'll grow way too big because we have no idea what we're doing, right? The value proposition is one piece of many battles. Like a coach, you can be like, okay, well, here's a sports team, right? It is not just about showing the value and the numbers to some of these people. A lot of people care about what's the value for the students. Will we keep retention? Will we keep all this kind of other stuff that goes into it? And I think St. Ambrose is a great example of what happens when we create things that will continue to last and continue to develop as we're going. And how will that affect retention? How will that affect students' lives on campuses? What do we need to continue to do to help students' lives on campus? And that's just small things, but not a lot of programs go into, okay, and I've got Chase's program. I've got the outline on my hand, and I've given it to 7 different schools within the last month. But the outline that Chase has done, and he'll never give himself this credit for it. It is 79 pages of quality content about how to keep kids involved, engaged, and helping out other pieces of campus. 79 pages. There's quantity right there. And I've given this to other schools, and other schools have called me back and said, hey, can I talk to this guy? And I think I've gotten one to you. I'm not sure. But my life is so crazy. But the point of the matter is that this is not just about how can one coach go into 2, 3, 4 coaches. It's also about what the kids need on campus to help them develop. It's also about what you want to see your program develop into. It's also about exactly what Chris said. How can I show the return on a value of more expenses, right? And those are all little pieces, and I'm sure that Chris and Chase will have like 30 other ways that they want to go into this, but there's so many little pieces that go into here's what we need to do to develop.
I'm going to jump back in here because we got to get through 2 more questions if we can to try to get out of here on time. And this is all good. I know I've played devil's advocate here. I've kind of poked the bear a little bit, and thank you guys for not jumping up and down on me. Second to last question. This one's going to be, everybody's going to have something for this one. But what are the best ways for someone to get involved in esports if they want to get involved in esports, be it at the collegiate level, the high school level, the amateur level? What is the best way to get involved?
Do it. I'm going to tell you what I am going to tell you what Todd Harris at High Res Studios told me when I went to the Smite launch tournament in 2013. And he still has no idea who I am to this day, and that is perfectly fine. But he is one of my he is one of the people that I look up to most in this space, and that is just do it. Get involved, right? I was a sophomore at Ball State. I literally had no idea what to do, and I got involved, right? And so I got involved. I had my call out meeting. We had 15 people our first year. Awesome, cool. We marketed that. We spread that around as much as we could. 3 years later, we had 200 people. We were holding LAN events on campus, and we were able to create this atmosphere. And now, 2 years later, Ball State now has a varsity esports program, right? So there is a pipeline to how this works. There is steps to how this works, but it all starts with how we started this conversation. Passion and commitment. Just do it. Just get started, right? I didn't know how to organize a tournament until I started organizing tournaments. It's something that you just work through. It's something that you ask questions about. It's something that you have to be engaged with and not just consider it a day job, right? This is both a culture, a hobby, and a passion. And you have to see it as that way to really stay engaged and to really keep up, because there's a lot of stuff happening at once and it's hard to keep up with sometimes.
Before we get to the rest of the panel, I just want to say, if any representatives from Nike are here, Chase will say "just do it" as many times as you want him to. Nick, I heard your name, your voice
Yes.
first. So Nick, why don't you go next?
He's absolutely right. You don't have to be necessarily running a tournament or like be on the team to get involved. It starts with just simple things of watching your teams play, or maybe if you're interested in a team or your college's team, see if you can sit on a scrim, see their comms, see what the experience is like. Go to an esports event. It just starts with being involved and looking into it, and then once you're there, maybe seeing what you like about it, what you don't like about it. There are so many different things that you can be involved in esports. It can be a player, you can be a coach. We talk about production, we can talk about marketing, we talk about team managing. There's so many different things you can do, even development into it. And don't be scared to start off small, see what you like, and then see if you can put your step your foot into get things a little bigger, get more involved. And if you're interested in something, research it, look into it. People in esports generally, in large portion, and probably I know everyone here, be more than willing to talk your head off on anything you'd like to know about esports. We are knowledge we will give to you to make sure that you are successful, make sure esports successful. We want esports to succeed. We don't want to try to like lock these little secrets up and throw away the key. We want you to get involved. And whether it's us or like anyone, your esports director, esports coach, even a player on your team or your favorite team, they want to help grow the passion. And if you have that same passion and you can spark that, that's going to help you get involved and help you succeed in it.
Mm-hmm. I laughed because I heard Caleb laughing, because Caleb cannot count on all hands, fingers and toes, how many nights he's been up past 2 a.m. talking about esports. Well, I know with me, but I'm sure with others as well. He's just up late. Yeah, Jim raising his hand too, and even Chris and I. Chris and I have sat in and like we'll just go in conferences and sit and chat and just talk about it the entire time. And you're 100% right, Nicholas. It's one of those things where you have to be engaged in that regard to even keep up.
Before the stream, I asked I asked Shifty, as I know him better. Sorry, I asked Shifty about how to go about answering a question better, because I felt like he would have a little bit more insight on how to change my perspective on something. That was literally like 4 minutes before we started the stream. I'm like, hey, I just answered this question. How would you answer it? How would you go about it? What's your like 2 cents on what we would do in terms of that? And that's the point, is that the people on this panel, and it's not just limited to us, there are thousands of professionals that do, and there's a whole YouTube channel dedicated to it. And I keep coming back to this. I keep forgetting his name. He works with Nerd Gaming. I'm sure someone on this panel might know who he is. But the point is that there are thousands and thousands of different ways to learn more and just get involved and to have an understanding about what's the 2-3 steps you need to do. The point is, and we keep coming back to this, you need to not only learn how to get involved and to just do it, as Jason said so fluently, but you need to take 3, 4, 5 steps and to learn what's happening when you're putting on a tournament. What's happening? What are the results? How are people taking the tournament? Get some surveys going. Get some more information going. As Chris said, analytics and knowing the value of what you're putting on and knowing what you should change, knowing what you should develop while you're doing this. That is so valuable into continuing to be involved in esports and to continue developing as you grow and as you work on these pieces. I'm going to find this channel, I promise you.
Nike, we'll say it 5 more times. Just cut the check. Chris, before I get to the last question, did you have anything to add there?
It's just a broken record, Jim. I could say a whole lot of everything you guys just said. Don't be afraid. Just do it. But then also a message to all of us industry vets. Don't gatekeep and welcome people into the scene as well. I know that, we talk about it, but like we got to practice what we preach too. And I transparently have been one of those people at times where I've been kind of like, you're trying to get into esports, tell me more. But like, no, I that was, when I was young and cocky and dropped the ego a long time ago. Yeah, just it goes both ways. Just do it, but we also got to let them just do it. And even if we think we could do it better than them, we just got to let them do it and then offer some advice after the fact.
If you're
That's all I
community
got to say.
if
Wait
you
a
are
minute.
community focused, if you're community focused, you're going to be fine. If you genuinely care about the community that you're serving, that you're running tournaments for, that you're running weeklies for, that you're just engaging, creating opportunities for in whatever regard, if you care about that community, put out a survey afterwards, an honest survey. Ask them, what did you think about the event? Did you feel safe at my event? Do you feel safe in the space that I'm creating? Um, do you feel like you're learning and growing in the space? Did you have fun? You right? That's like that's what's the most important. Did you have a good time? And if you put those surveys out and you get negative responses, don't, like Chris is saying on another level, don't gatekeep. Reach out to those people and say, "Hey, I'd love to get you involved next time. What can we do to make it better?" And if you keep following that model, you're not going to have an issue. You're going to learn, and you're going to have people that are going to reach out to you and want to help you if you're open-minded enough to take that step.
Chris, let me get this straight. You're saying there's a way to get rid of an ego?
Yeah.
I have not heard of this phenomenon. Some people might want me to look into that, but they're probably wrong. We'll get to the final question here. This is the one I'm dreading to ask, just because it's something I don't like talking about, because I think it's perpetuated by a lot of talking heads that don't really know what they're talking about. But there is a lot of negative news, and there always has been with video games, and about how it negatively affects the kids who play them, the adults even who play them. Uh, and it's been around forever in the industry. But what each of you would say at this point, put yourself in the mind of a coach. If you're not a coach, try. If you are a coach, you've had this discussion plenty of times. But what do you say to a parent who's hesitant to let their kid follow an esports dream because of the negative attitudes towards video games?
I would say first and foremost, I understand. You always want to, empathize with the person first, but then you can go into the benefits. So acknowledge that, hey, I get it. You've got concerns. That's okay. But let me tell you some stories, or let me explain to you what opportunities are available. And it's an opportunity. At the end of the day, this isn't rocket science. All we're doing is working so other people can play. That's it. I mean, you asked why there's no ego drop. That it's like all we're doing is trying to ensure that someone else can grow up in a safe environment, like Chase said, have some fun, and be productive at the same time. And it is so much better for a child to go do what they're already going to do, play Fortnite, play Valorant, whatever, but to do it in a competitive environment where they learn integrity, they learn sociability, they learn sportsmanship, they learn commitment at a younger age, than if they were just going to play solo queue. They're going to do it anyway. You might as well put them in a structured environment.
I would say, uh, and this is kind of gauging, and this is a little bit of a different perspective, but it's one that I have used before. And I'm failing at finding the way that I usually word it, but I would ask, isn't rock music the devil's music? Isn't the Beatles the devil's music? Right? I mean, that's how it was perceived in the media. That's how metal music is now perceived in the media. That's how it's been perceived, but that's not the case. And that's what we've seen over the past 30 years, 40 years since that was the conversation, right? Now it's an entire industry. Now it's massive and it's bigger than us. So, to the parents that are hesitant to let their kids follow esports, understand, yes, I like empathize with them and say I understand, but also ask them, what did their parents not want them to get into, that they were like, you just don't understand it, you just don't get it, right? They have to be open-minded in that regard to put themselves in another lens of a perspective of their child. And no matter what, I would hope that a parent would always just want what's best for their kid, right? And if you see that your kid is so engaged with this thing, and they've made friendships from this thing, they've felt passionate about it, it's something that they look forward to, no matter what that is, you have to acknowledge that. And you have to look at that in a lens and ask yourself, how is this good for them? What can I do to support them by doing this and support their journey in this, right? Because at the end of the day, the hardest thing you have to understand as a parent, and this is coming from someone who helped raise my sisters, is they are going to make their own decisions. You cannot stop them from making their own decisions. You can try to guide them, but the most important thing is that you support them and that you're looking at it from their perspective and trying to help them find that opportunity, not being just against that opportunity. I have people in my community, and I feel very strongly about this because I'm a Super Smash Brothers TO, and I'll just bring it up, right? There was a lot of pedophilia that came out about the Smash scene recently, and it was very hard to deal with last summer. Yeah, there was a lot, even top players. Um, there was a whole foundation that basically crumbled of this pedophilia ring in the Smash scene, and it was terrible, awful. But now we look at that seriously through esports, right? And we say, okay, that happened. What can we do to be better? Why did that happen? What did we do to get to that level? And why were people not engaged in following it and speaking up about it, right? It's because sometimes they didn't feel supportive, and it's because there was lack of security at events, and it was because there was lack of registration, there was lack of accountability, there was lack of all of these things. And we have to understand esports is still new, right? But it's a growing industry. Don't be part of the problem, be part of the solution and helping to find more solutions to these problems. And getting parents on board is the best way to do that, right? If I have a parent's phone number and I say, hey, I'm just letting you know your kid left the weekly like 10 minutes ago. I'm just making sure he's getting home safe. Now they can trust me for this kid to be at the events, and I now have a connection with them where if something happens, I can just pick up the phone and call him, right? And now that's an extreme. And I am going to extremes when talking about this, but you also have to look at both ways, both the really good things and the really bad things when you're considering this, and how we grow and how we really create this conversation.
Caleb, Nicholas, anything to add there?
I'm sure Shifty will have a little bit more. The collegiate esports scene hasn't seen too much backlash yet because we haven't had the real ability to do too many in-person things yet. But it goes back to having the ability to put on something that is where you can learn, right? We'll have negative things. No sports doesn't, right? I'm pretty sure if you go look at football right now, 3 out of every 20 guys have been in some way committed for a felony of some fashion, right?
Okay, I'm gonna real quick. I'm gonna let you finish your answer. Let's not go throwing out statistics we can't verify. We're not here to throw shade at anybody, Caleb. But
no, I'm not.
I know where you're going. I know
I'm
where you're
not trying
going,
to
but
say
let's not throw shade.
We don't live in a perfect world. People will make mistakes. And while we still go into this conversation of, esports is such a closed off corner of the world, let's introduce the things that we're doing positively. Let's introduce the fact that every single year there is, I can't remember the name of the charity, but it's the very popular one. Dr. Lupo does a whole bunch of stuff with them every single year.
Gamers Outreach.
No.
GDQ? Are you talking about GDQ?
No, it's the hospital. It is Extra Life and yeah, Extra Life is one of the greatest examples of here's something we do every year to promote positivity. I'm terrible with names.
Let's just all shout out different gaming charities because let's be honest, and you touched on that real quick. Gaming gives back, and that's something we haven't touched on. But gaming gives back, and there are probably more gaming charities than the 5 of us could come up with. And Caleb's making a great point there. Nicholas, did you have anything to add to our conversation? Because we did have 1 or maybe 2 questions from
I'll be
Twitch
very
chat.
quick. So everyone said some great things, and I just want to boil it down to it's not an esports thing. It's a community thing. Let me just say that. And what everyone here today is trying to accomplish is to create a wonderful, amazing community that involves esports. So it's not just something that's like, oh, esports is good, esports is bad, or music's good, music is bad, or R-rated movies are bad, and therefore, whatever generation of you want to blame in those scenarios, it's about the community involved in that, and we're creating communities that are safe, positive, and something to be proud of.
Couldn't have said it better myself. We did have the one question here from Juicebox Nemesis asking, and this is mostly for the coaches, how do you guys balance the fun side of esports with the competitive side of each game?
Like fun events, man. Yeah, you ever hear about putting items on and Smash, turning it up to 200% speed and then running at each other with all you got? That's some fun, and it goes back into the passion. How do you balance the competitive with the competitive with the casual? Well, I mean, are you hosting Among Us nights with your students? Are you just bringing in a board game and saying, "All right, we're gonna hang out and play this this Saturday"? Are you hosting? Are you hosting like movie nights, right? I know this year we haven't been able to do it due to COVID, but last year I had some major weebs in my program, myself included, and we would sit on Saturdays or Sundays and we'd watch the new anime that's dropping on the weekend together, just having fun and hanging out. And I think Shifty kind of culminated it really well. It's a community, right? So you have to balance the seriousness with just being yourself. Don't, if you're taking it too seriously, you're getting lost into the work and the intricacies of what's going on. That's fine. You also got to be adaptive. You also just got to be in the moment with your players. And if you're not in the moment with your players or your community, they're going to see that and they're going to recognize that. And then there's going to be a little bit of a distance there. You don't want that, right? You want to be the person that they can come to. You want to be that kind of support pillar. So having an active engagement and paying attention to active listening in the moment is imperative for that.
Let me touch on that. It boils down to communication. You absolutely have to have very good communication and clear expectations from both the coach and the players. This is something that makes it really important to have a coach that is involved with the teams and not to delegate too much responsibilities. You have to have someone that is got their finger on the pulse of the team to understand when they are getting between the line of too serious and need to have some fun, need to mix things up. Every program is going to have a different amount of competitive responsibilities. And making sure that you understand that and you set clear expectations for what the students need is important. But along with that, you also need to make sure that you have an idea of when things are going too far in a competitive sense or stressful sense, etc., and what you need to do to mix things up. Again, creating a community is absolutely paramount to that, but also understanding what the community's say pulse is going to be, what they're going to be going to one extreme or the other. And it's really important to make sure that you get to know each and every person on your team, because every person is different. Every player is different. They need different things. They have different barriers. They have different things they need to make sure that they feel safe, they're happy, they're having fun, they're performing well, all of that. And they also need to understand what's expected out of them when they sign up for esports so that they don't have expectations that they didn't have going into it. Nothing's worse than not having clear expectations. And that's something the structure is going to have to provide, the coaches are going to have to provide, and hopefully your foundations already makes clear.
I am also going to jump on this one just because I have a couple of individual examples. One of them from Overwatch, my Overwatch team. They had a great match against Randolph-Macon. They won 2-0 in a best of 3. In the NECC, we play the third match out at Overwatch for tiebreaker points for the end of the season. And my team said, "Hey, coach, we want to try some stuff. Can we try it?" They'd already won the match 2-0. So yeah, go have fun, guys. See if it works. And they got absolutely destroyed. But they had fun getting destroyed. And then on the opposite side, last week, my Valorant team did not have a great week. They lost the first map 0-13. They were losing the second map 0-12. And in the all chat, they went to the other team and they go, "Hey guys, just you want to have a knife fight?" They're like, we want to have fun the last round here. We know it's a lost cause. Do you want to have a night fight? And the other team's like, really? Can we do that? And luckily we had a really great producer who told them, yeah, you guys can go knife fight. And we had a big 5-on-5 night fight in the courtyard. So, I mean, even within the competitive portion of it, you can still find ways to balance out the fun and competitive sides. Sometimes you can't, like sometimes if it's a close match, you're obviously not going to do those things. But those are just a couple of examples. But I know Caleb wants to jump in here.
Yeah, I think that being a player, not as much as a coach as you guys, but I have coached a little bit, but being a player for a long, long time, the major piece I have to say is it's about the people you surround yourself with. If you have toxic people on your team, you're going to have a toxic environment. If you have really good, positive, energetic people on your team, you have a really positive, energetic chat in which you guys will continue to come back to and want to continue practice with and to continue getting more energy from it. And it will continue being a feedback loop of, hey, let's get more energy. Hey, let's keep doing this. Hey, let's keep doing this. Hey, let's work on this. Hey, we had a tough match, but let's do these things to figure it out and try and get better at what that looks like. And it really comes back to, do you have a positive, energetic feedback loop of what you're going? And if you don't, what's the problem? Is there a specific person that's a problem, or are you an outcome of your surroundings? Are you being? Is it your surroundings that are doing this, or is it a family problem? Is it something like that? And I've seen lots and lots of different problems over the year. One of the best is the third team that I was ever on. The captain of the team, who was assigned by the organization that we were at, his family was in a really bad spot. And because of that, he was a really negative person, which threw us all off because this guy was the nicest guy we had ever met. But his parents were going through a divorce. His grandmother just died the week that was all happening. And on top of everything else that was going on, they were losing their house. So you want to add a crap storm of what's going on? This guy owned it. This guy was still trying to be positive, but you could tell something was wrong. And in some cases, you can't fix it in a light switch of a fix. But learning what that is and being able to evaluate your surroundings and figure out how can you create a positive atmosphere to which players want to continue coming back to, continue learning from, continue developing on. That's one of the major pieces, and you have to be able to just work on that. And that's, I gotta say that that's got to be the major piece in everything. If you're going off of things, it's got to be the major piece.
Yeah, you're talking about emotional intelligence right there. You're just talking about being able to read a room and understand. They don't have the next pages written. So how do you help them write those next pages? How do you actively listen to what's going on so that you are engaged and able to help? And identifying, there's IQ, there's your and intellectual qualities, right? And then there's your emotional qualities. So it's not just your intelligence, but how you open your heart and really hear people out, hear their stories, and respond. Being able to be empathetic in that regard, like we talked about earlier, I think that's vital for a community like esports, because there's not just in collegiate, but there's so many people involved that all have different stories and how they got here. And I think that listening to those stories and having a better idea of who they are is going to create a stronger trust with you guys. And that's what community is. It's trusting other people in your area to have fun with them, right?
Chris, did you want to add anything there?
I appreciate you asking me, but I'll be honest with you. I think that everyone's kind of put in a lot of really good points, and I'll be the first to say that I'm not a coach. I think Chase is a much better coach than I am. Shifty's a much better coach than I am. So I'll just kind of leave it with everyone said.
Alrighty. Well, we didn't have any other questions from Twitch chat. We're currently 7 minutes over time, but we started 10 minutes late, which means we're actually 3 minutes ahead of schedule. And I'm going to get us out of here in under a minute, so we'll end 2 minutes early. I want to thank everybody who was on the panel today. Nicholas Travis, Chris Postel, and I made sure to get that right, Chris, no worries. Chase Newcomb, and Caleb Gloubet from up there in Canada. And yes, Caleb, I said it right once. That's all you get. But no, and we're so glad that we were able to, the NECC was able to bring you this panel on our esports education series. Hopefully we're going to have a lot more of them. Hopefully I didn't do too bad of a job and allows me to come back and host them again. For everyone on the panel, my name is Coach Jim. Thank you for joining us today, and make sure to come back and watch more esports next week.